Alright, so this is for Kenneth here. Um, so the first thing is you always want to be aware what you're uploading. And so uploading something like this, the original size of this was um, actually this big, which is actually only like 5 inches, and so just be aware of that. And so we're just gonna step that forward again, and so the first thing I would say right off the bat is, and I realize this is an acrylic painting. You've got good proportions, you've got good, good use of color, or a good idea of color. And the issue though is everything is very saturated. So when you bring that in here, you look at your histogram, and the histogram here for the colors is all over the place. Like everything's spiking all over different levels. You have a majority of midtones, but not any highlights, or sorry, shadows or highlights. So that's the first issue that you have. And so what I would say right off the bat is that you want to define a lighting source, and mute the colors that you are working with in order to kind of deal with it. So I'm just going to duplicate this layer here real quick, and then I'm going to actually duplicate it again, and one to have a backup and one to have a kind of something to work on here. Um, so the first thing I would do is I would go into adjustments and hue and saturation. I would take the saturation down. By taking that saturation down, um, you're still getting a midtone, but now we're actually identifying kind of where things are going. And you use those saturated colors not so much for um, an entire entity, but more of like a how do I want to call it? More of like an accent. So those are going to kind of be what's going to kind of show your scene. And then from there, what we're going to do is I'm going to add in some shadows. So we're going to pick a lighting source, and I'm just going to kind of start off. Let's use a blue tone here, because you've got a lot of yellows and reds in this area. So we're going to use blue to create some of the shadows, and then we're going to kind of pick the idea of how these colors are going to kind of emphasize. And so what I'm going to do is start off with this on a multiply layer, and just to show you, that would actually help to have some opacity and flow. So, but we're going to kind of build up, not that quite blue, but so we're going to build up these tones here, like so. And this is going to be real low opacity just to start off with. So we're going to build up these tones, and it's going to give you kind of an idea of how things are kind of build up here, if that makes sense. So as we build up, the lighting, starting to put some of this information in here, you can see now that some of this starts popping out a little bit more. So forms are going to start popping out a little bit more. We can put some of this in shadows and highlights, and these forms are going to accent a little bit more. So you're going to see a little bit more of that emphasis of your figure starting to pop out a little bit more. And so you're going to have shadows up under. You gotta really look at where your shadows are going to pop, and so that's kind of a thing that you want to really pay attention to. And so I'm just kind of putting in some rough tones and values here to get that information going. Um, and we're going to put some of that down here. This is going to cast a little shadow. So with that being said, so once I get those tones in there, you can see already that the form is starting to kind of take effect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to mask out this area here, and we're going to default that. So now with the mask, I can start pulling in some of those real bright highlights that you had. And so we've got that strong lighting kind of going on, maybe a little bit here, on her shoulder, type of thing. So we're going to add in those kind of bright colors where that highlight takes place. And that's going to give us a little bit more emphasis to play with. I'm also going to go here, and we're going to darken in some of the background too, to kind of push the characters forward. You can see as I darken this background, the characters are kind of coming forward. We can also go in and we can add some of those bright colors here. So what I'm going to do is go like this, and we're just going to do real rough. Alright, so here I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to invert that selection. So, oops. Let's see here. Let's see if we can reselect. Nope. Looks like here we go. All right, and nope, that didn't do the lasso. So let's do this again here. So I'm just going to really quickly paint this out, even faster this time. And we're going to add in this here. Okay, so with that in place, then I can start painting out, there we go, some of these brights here, and kind of emphasizing that sunset, that cloud system that you've got going on. So those are little bits and pieces. So as you can see, as I start building these up in this group, you can see I went from this super saturated flat to now I'm getting kind of this brightness look over there. And so with that in mind, then what I can do is, if I've got like a light source that's defined, I can start lightening that light source up. So in this case, you would be adding in kind of your brighter, mixing it with white. And so, oops, let's multiply it. So I'm going to have to create a new layer here. So we'd start mixing it with white to kind of get some of that shine going on, and that kind of emphasis, maybe a little bit over here. You know, define the nose, and using the light and shadow to kind of sell this information. So, you know, you want to really push that light and shadow information, as you can see. And so that is kind of a, you know, one aspect that I would tell you is just keep pushing the lights and darks. Because right now, you've got, you know, so if I grab these right here and I merge this layer, so right now you've got solid white, or solid, you know, saturated colors with no like real emphasis on anything. But as I start painting in more, as I start developing this, you see I'm starting to push things to the background. I'm accenting the background to silhouette the figures a little bit more. And then what you can understand is as you start accenting those highlighted colors, especially on, you know, this type of character, you can start putting in a little rim light where it's going to kind of pop in. She would get a little bit of blue reflection from the armor. So would you. You'd have a little bit of blue reflection up there. You know, so that is, these are all little things that you can start kind of dealing with and working with to kind of build up your scene a little bit more. Just always be aware of the color choices that you use, and the kind of how the overall piece reads. Because if I look at the navigator here, even, you know, at this level, like everything's super bright. And as I add things in there, it starts adding a little bit more weight and a little bit more kind of emphasis. And then you want to put more detail into the face. Faces are what draws our eyes. So adding in, a little bit of, shadows under the nose, shadows under the lips, you know, shadows under the eyes and things like that are going to really accent the facial form and features. So you really be aware of that as well. All right.